Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. In a moment, you'll see John Steppe's shining, smiling face. John back from a little R&R, but 2 weeks removed now, folks, if you can believe that or not. Or by the time this airs, over 2 weeks. We record this on Wednesday afternoon, August 7th. John, of course, beat writer for the Iowa Hawkeyes in the Gazette. Cedar Rapids Gazette, the Gazette.com or Gazette.com. You see all of John's information on the screen along with mine throughout this show, where you can see all of John's handiwork either on social media or, again, online. And in print, great piece he wrote on A.J. Eads, former Hawkeye linebacker, doing big things with the Big Ten offices and onward and upward with that guy, as you heard Pat Angerer talk about on this show a couple of weeks ago. And also, John had an interview with John Budmeyer. So we're going to get into that in the first two segments with John, and then we'll close out the show with our buddy and business partner, along with Greg Kajewski. This week, it'll be James Seils, the other part of BettorEdge, at BettorEdge or BettorEdge.com. So, John, my friend, as always, thanks for joining us. You got a little sun on us during your breaks, so thanks for joining us. How's everything going with you, my friend?
It's great. Getting closer to football season now, if I can do my math right here, which is a big if, as we record 24 days until season opener. And this week, media day, local media day, kids day, open practice. So it's getting to be football season again.
Yeah, and before we get to your 2 weeks ago at Big Ten Media Days and during Iowa's Day, I do want to mention, to John's point, scrimmage starts at 11, and of course, John and I and other reporters throughout the Iowa program will be talking about that and rolling into the season. And as I mentioned with Pat Angerer on, Pat's going to join us on the regular, the newly minted football analyst on radio with Gary Dolphin, and we had Dolphin Pat on here a couple weeks ago. John had a podcast with those guys as well, so we're going to have Pat on throughout the year, along with our usual suspects of James Vandenberg, the former Hawkeye quarterback, James Morris, former Hawkeye linebacking great. So we're going to have a lot of fun this fall. Hopefully it's a good, fun fall, John, as we're both smiling here. And I know the fans are ready to go, as you mentioned. Heck, not just when we record 24 days from today, August 7th, Wednesday afternoon. By the time this airs, there are a lot of people they may miss it on statewide television. So if they watch it online, it could be less than 3 weeks by the time some people watch this. So excitement abound, my friend. Get us even more excited if you can about some of your reporting at Indianapolis. What jumped out at you? What were some of your questions? What were some of the answers? I'm throwing you a broad stroke here, but fill in the blanks for us because you've got a lot of material, I know, my friend.
Yeah, if there's one kind of big takeaway from, so Big Ten Media Days is a 3-day event. You have 6 teams per day. And really, the day that Iowa was speaking to media, it really stood out to me that the question mark around this team is the offense. And I don't have these numbers right in front of me, but I think I counted it as something like 6 of the 7 questions or 5 of the 6 questions that Kirk Ferentz had during the televised press conference, which of course is not all of his availability that day. But during that portion, almost every question that we heard was about the offense. And that's kind of the thing that people want to know, not just in Iowa, but really across the league. That's going to be the interesting thing to see with this team. We heard yet again in Indianapolis that Cade McNamara is QB1 as fall camp started, which started on July 31st. So he's the starter. Brendan Sullivan is a very capable backup. A lot of teams would envy having a backup with as much experience as Brendan Sullivan has. This is a big difference in experience between what Brendan Sullivan had versus, say, Deacon Hill last year. So that's a reason for optimism there. Of course, the question with Cade is going to be, can he go 12 games healthy? And then on the defensive side is interesting, kind of looking back, a much different story from a year ago with Jay Higgins, where he wasn't really that household name yet in the Big Ten when he was at this event in 2023, replacing Noah Shannon, who was initially going to be speaking at Big Ten Media Days. He steps aside because of the sports wagering stuff going on at the time. And at that time, Higgins was kind of new, I think, a little bit more to the national scene. He's really on the radar this year. Cleveland.com puts together a Big Ten preseason poll among beat writers from across the conference. I voted in it. A lot of other newspaper writers voted in it. And Jay Higgins finished second in that for preseason Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. And Phil Steele, obviously very well-respected national writer, he has Jay Higgins as his preseason defensive player of the year. So it is cool to see the Higgins family reunion in Indianapolis. He's from the Indy area. But yeah, he's now a known entity. And really, when you look at the numbers, another of the things I wrote about since getting back from Indianapolis, you look at the numbers, and last year really was a special season. And now it'll be an interesting thing to see, okay, what can he accomplish and what can the rest of this defense accomplish in 2024?
So, John, you had mentioned to me off the air. Let's bring it on the air. Congratulations, you're now an AP voter. And you have, I want you to, if you don't mind, telling us why you picked the Hawks where you did, and or where you picked the Hawks and why you picked them where you did. This comes out early next week, and you've already turned in your ballot. So lay it on us, my friend. And also, most importantly, again, congratulations.
Thank you. So full poll comes out Monday. I'll be curious as much as everyone else watching in terms of where the other 60 voters had a lot of these teams. But for me personally, I have Iowa at number 21. That's going to probably seem low for some fans considering the experience coming back on defense. No, this could be a CFP team. And my number 21 vote certainly does not write off that possibility. I think it's, especially if the offense clicks, this is very much a real possibility. But I also have to avoid homerism. I have to avoid any special handling of local teams. Those are both criteria set by the Associated Press as for voters. And okay, as much as you have a lot of experience coming back on defense, obviously Iowa special teams is Iowa special teams, not really much needed to say there. This is still the team that was outscored by ranked opponents. I think it was 92-0 last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to see the offensive improvement before I start believing and voting accordingly. So number 21 for now, but with the big caveat that if this offense really is hitting, and not just hitting against Illinois State or Troy, but actually against quality power conference opponents, you'll certainly see that rise. And, it's in line with where Iowa has been in past years in terms of preseason polls. Looking back, they were 25th in the preseason poll last year, ended up being 24, weren't ranked in 2022, but then 18 was the preseason poll in 2021, finished at 23. So this is kind of the neighborhood that Iowa has typically been in. And I certainly see the potential for more for this Iowa team. But for now, 21 is my spot for the Hawkeyes.
John, not too far off, because recently and earlier, the coaches poll has the Hawks at 25th. So you're right in the ballpark. No problem there. No one's going to take offense to that. Like you said, we need to see more. And I think a lot of us will agree with you. I think this could be a CFP team, but we need to see the proof in the pudding. So let's go from there. But thanks for sharing that with us, and congrats again on being an AP voter. So we'll talk more about that every week, because you throughout the season, so you'll have plenty to share with us. Thanks for that, John.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be my Saturday late night after filing my last story. I'll be, going through all that. So looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it as well. Thank you, John. I'm just curious what Luke had said to you guys there.
Yeah, kind of looking back through my notes, the first thing that kind of comes to mind that we keep on hearing about is motion. That is kind of one hallmark of this, of this new scheme, is we're seeing a lot of it. We saw a lot of it during spring practices, and Luke Lachey, mentions that he's a fan of the motion, switching up the looks on defenses. That can create the opportunity to potentially get open in space. Those things are music to the ears of a tight end or a wide receiver, or pretty much anybody really on the offensive side. So, Luke Lachey is a very optimistic person, and he's optimistic about this offense. Of course, there's optimism from players in past years about the offense, and the results weren't there. And of course, kind of have to wait now 24 days or whatever it is in terms of, okay, will kind of some of this optimism really translate into results, because there's a lot of upside for this Iowa team if the offense can really click. But everyone that's seen the last two seasons also knows that, that's a big if.
Yeah. And, John, not just Cade McNamara's health, Also, Luke Lachey's coming off a major injury and a surgery. Says he's healthy. Everybody says he's healthy. Same with Cade. We're going to have to see when these games start playing out. Hopefully, everybody can stay healthy. I know every team says that, every player says that, but we're hoping that's the case. We'll be back with more viewers of Hawkeye. I'm Dave O'Hara. He's John Steppe. Back with more in just a few moments.
Hawkeye is brought to you by BettorEdge, your ultimate social betting marketplace. With no VIG, you're bound to win more on every bet on BettorEdge. Founded by Hawkeye alum James Seils and proud Iowan Greg Kieski, BettorEdge delivers an unmatched betting experience. Plus, what's not to love when they're committed to supporting charities and children's hospitals near you? Join the action now. Sign up at bettoredge.com/Hawkeye and get $10 to start winning more today. BettorEdge, where your social betting means your bets go further and you win more.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. And momentarily, you'll see John Steppe joining me. John, beat writer for the Iowa Hawkeyes and for the Cedar Rapids Gazette. You just did a nice sit-down, great research by you, as always, with A.J. Eads, former Hawkeye linebacking great.
Yeah, with A.J. Eads, that's a name kind of long-term to keep an eye on in terms of college football, because he has a very upward career trajectory right now. And you're talking about a guy who's only 36 years old and is the vice president for football administration for the Big Ten. And as all of these moving pieces happen in college athletics, football is at the center of all these things. So really that VP position is a big deal in terms of, that's where kind of a lot of these decisions are getting made. But in terms of what AJ does from a day-to-day, he's not necessarily the guy who's, figuring out expansion or anything, but he's kind of basically running the sport for the Big Ten. And, when you see the sideline tablets that you'll see throughout this season, that was one of AJ Eads' projects. Those will be iPads, by the way, that the Big Ten will be using. So the implementation of the sideline tablets, the in-helmet communication, you have a lot of these different things that as football takes center stage for the Big Ten, it's the former Hawkeye, Eads, who's basically kind of running the show and being that person, that kind of right-hand person for Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti when it comes to the sport of football. And look at it, and a big part of that job is working with the head coaches, with, I wasn't going to say all 14, but now all 18 coaches in the Big Ten.
Right.
And really the coaches, you can tell, have a great appreciation and respect for what Eads has done. I talked to Loxley out at Maryland, and he talked about having a football guy, somebody who's played the sport, and that's not something you always get. To the north, Fleck with Minnesota was talking about how at some point, if Eads wants to be, he will be a league commissioner at some point. And that's some high praise there, to have a coach say on the record, name attributed, all that he really sees AJ as a future commissioner. AJ's focus right now is just doing what he's doing right now. That's kind of his preference, but plenty of other people are happy to hype up what his career trajectory could be. Somebody that's really jumped at opportunities. When he's first at the Big Ten, he was the sport administrator, not for football, but for 100% Olympic sports. So is field hockey, swimming and diving. And he'll be the first one to say he was not a field hockey expert when he started out in that. But I talked to Lisa Salucci, Iowa's field hockey coach, and she really sang his praises in terms of what he did as an administrator for that sport. And obviously has worked his way up now to being a football administrator. So that was a fun conversation. Kind of was able to take readers a little bit into his world, and including when one coach had a request for him midway through the interview with me. So yeah, that was too good not to include in the article. So that was a lot of fun to write. Every article usually is fun to write, but this one was especially fun to write. And then you were mentioning the podcast with John Budmeyer. It's been quite the last 2.5 years.
Amen.
For John
Yes.
Budmeyer, because he was offensive coordinator at Colorado State. That didn't work out. Then now this is when his wife was about 8 months or so pregnant. He goes and takes at first what was going to be a volunteer job helping at Iowa. Then he becomes an analyst. Then after they seemed happy with what he, was able to produce there. He gets the title boost to special assistant to the head coach. And then now he gets promoted again to wide receivers coach. So he's going to have a few, the full collection of business cards, really, after all these different titles that he's had. So he's somebody that, has kind of filled in with whatever role has been helpful. Obviously, the quarterback results were not great these last few years. So he'll hope for better results now as wide receiver coach. But one interesting thing, we talked about a lot of things, talked about his coaching journey. He has strong connections to Wisconsin, and kind of what that experience has afforded him. But in terms of getting this wide receiver production turned around, one thing that he talked a lot about was accountability, and that the accountability factor has to be there. And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out in terms of as the season progresses, because it's no secret, it was abundantly obvious to me, it was abundantly obvious to him. I'm sure he saw the question coming that, hey, this has not been spectacular wide receiver production for Iowa in recent years. So now it's up to him and Tim Lester to kind of turn that around, and it'll be a younger group. He's very he's very optimistic about Jarriett Bowie, redshirt freshman, who's really stood out, who, has had the time now to be able to learn this new offense and has really kind of impressed Kirk Ferentz. You have to be fairly impressive to, at Bowie's age, be a first teamer on the preseason depth chart.
John, thank you so much for all your great coverage. I know you've been a traveling man, and thanks for getting landed in Iowa City and sitting down for a few minutes and talking with us. Always great to see you, John. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.
Back with more Hawkeye in just a few moments.
Hawkeye is brought to you by BettorEdge, your ultimate social betting marketplace. With no VIG, you're bound to win more on every bet on BettorEdge. Founded by Hawkeye alum James Seils and proud Iowan Greg Kajewski, BettorEdge delivers an unmatched betting experience. Plus, what's not to love when they're committed to supporting charities and children's hospitals near you? Join the action now. Sign up at bettoredge.com/Hawkeye and get $10 to start winning more today. BettorEdge, where your social betting means your bets go further and you win more.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. You'll see momentarily James Seils joining us. James is the other half of our partnership with BettorEdge. My buddy Greg Kajewski, you've heard me talk about, and Greg's been on this show. Now we bring you James Seils, and he is a Northwest Iowa native, University of Iowa alum, and now again our production partner and business partners with BettorEdge. James, how you doing today? And thanks for joining us, my friend.
Hey, Dave, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So let's get into the Hawkeyes, man. You were there from 07 to 11. Let's talk a little bit about your time at Iowa at Kinnick Stadium, how much you love the Hawkeyes. And then we're going to get into some differentiation between you, BettorEdge, and other sports books and sports betting sites and apps. And we'll talk about that. And we'll talk a little bit into the Iowa Hawkeye schedule. A lot of nuances and changes this year with the Big Ten now expanding to 18 teams. So let's start with you first in your time at the University of Iowa. And of course, you went to that world famous Steppe Business School and graduated. So congratulations. That is a huge feather in the cap. I think the only other guest I've had on, there have been a few others, but Caitlin Clark was another one of those. So you're in tall cotton here in big company there, James. So fire away when you're ready and talk to us about your University of Iowa experience, please.
Yeah, me and Caitlin are at about the same level of
sure,
prestige when it comes to a guest. Yeah, like you said, I joined the University of Iowa in 2007. I'm from Western Iowa, so a good chunk of that area is either Husker fans or Iowa State Cyclone fans. And so I kind of went away from the pack and joined the University of Iowa in 2007. I was an accounting major, so like you said, I went through the Steppe College of Business. I graduated in 2011, and then I actually did the Masters of Accounting there in 2012.
What differentiates you, not just from like Circa, but the traditional sports books and sports apps? Because I find what you guys do, and Greg was on here about a month and a half ago talking about it, but let's reiterate what you do that differentiates you in the marketplace, please, James.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it can be boiled down really into one main thing. All the apps that you typically use when it comes to sports betting, daily fantasy, other, play betting games are usually all user against a house. So basically what that means is that the company behind it, whether it be DraftKings, Sportsbook, or anything, they're setting prices and you are basically going and taking that price. We operate more on a peer-to-peer model. So basically, instead of you going to a sports book and saying, I want Iowa over 7.5 wins this regular season, well, the sports book's going to tell you, okay, you got to pay minus 160 for that. We operate differently, where if you want that bet, you basically say, okay, I want this over 7.5 wins. I'm willing to pay, minus 120. As long as someone somewhere else in the world wants the under 7.5 wins at plus 120 or worse, our platform just trades it and it becomes a bet amongst users. It could be you versus one person. It could be you versus 10 people, depending on how much you put up. But there's never a central entity house involved, and we never, price bets. We don't do any of that. It's all down to our users. And so the nice thing there is, it's your information versus someone else's information versus your information against a conglomerate of people and experts and everything like that. And so, you always have a better advantage coming through our platform because you are competing against another user. The other great part about peer-to-peer exchange style is once you, fulfill that bet, like if I have Iowa over 7.5 wins, in a traditional model, you might get what's called a cash out offer if Iowa rattles off 6-0, right? The book's like, hey, we want to minimize our losses. Well, what you can do on our platform is you can say, hey, that the value of this over 7.5 win ticket is a lot more than what it was when I bought it. So then you can actually sell it for more money. And as long as someone else is willing to take on the risk on the other side, you can lock in a little bit of profit. And vice versa, if Iowa were, unfortunately to start out 0-3, you can kind of minimize your losses and get off that ticket. So that's really the main way, you compare our traditional marketplace peer-to-peer model with the traditional sports betting applications. But we are also a social platform. So everything you do is shared amongst all the people on the platform, all your friends that are on there. You can copy and fade people's bets. You can tip each other. You can banter and do all that fun stuff.
Well, the great thing is, and not Circa, but they're rumbling that some other of the big name sports books want to start charging a tax on your winnings. I don't know how far that'll go. You don't do that. It costs nothing to do this. There's no VIG, as you mentioned. You're not paying a bookie or a sports book 10% or anything else, as I mentioned, a VIG. It's all free. All states can do this. So like my friends in Missouri, I do a radio show in Southern Iowa, Northern Missouri. They can also do this. So it's not just the depending what day it is, as we record this on Wednesday afternoon, August 7th, but there are only a certain amount of states that can do online sports apps and sports betting with sports books. Yours is available right now, I believe, in 45 states, as Greg has told us in the past. So play away. Again, at BettorEdge or BettorEdge.com, download the free app and start playing, or as James said, start competing against your fellow sports bettors. What I like about this, too, is you said the smack talk, and you can kind of talk about other players or other bets and other bettors. The Pac-12 has now essentially become part of the Big Ten, 18 teams now. And you've got Washington, and again, we mentioned Oregon and USC and UCLA. So now the 14-team Big Ten is now the 18-team. So there's a lot to consider as you're nodding your head. I'm giving you a lot of info here. So you're putting yourself out there. Give us what you got for season totals and that kind of thing, please, James.
The Minnesota-Iowa game has now become my favorite rivalry game. And I like our chances, especially being motivated after losing it the way we did on the fair catch call last year. And so, hopefully we can get that W. And then, really the rest of the way, I only see, 3 other games where one game for sure, you're looking at Ohio State, it's probably a loss. And then, the Wisconsin game, I think this is a big year for Luke Fickell. Last year probably didn't go as planned. They got a new quarterback from Miami. And so I expect them to really come out motivated in that game. And so I could see us definitely losing that game. And then Nebraska, same thing. Second year coach, Matt Rule, he always does really well in the second year. They got their 5-star quarterback in, supposed to be the Heisman according to all Nebraska fans. So we'll see. I could see that one being a loss, but really I think the floor for us is 8-4. And that's really why I took that over 7.5. So if you're looking at the number at 8.5, I think 9-3 is very attainable. I think double-digit wins is very possible. But like I said, I think the floor is 8-4. So anything, if you can get over 7.5, that was my pick.
I like the way you're thinking. And yes, it is week 6. Hawkeyes play their first 3 games at home. Again, as we mentioned, Illinois State, Iowa State, and Troy. And then they go to Minnesota, as you mentioned, where you and Greg and BettorEdge are headquartered out of the Twin Cities or near the University of Minnesota. But then also there's a bye week after that Minnesota game. Then they go on the road, the Hawks do, to Ohio State, then back home again, as you mentioned, in week 6 against UW, University of Washington. So as the schedule plays out, as you mentioned, some nuances and changes, but I love the way you're thinking. Yeah, get that over under. If you can get it at 7.5, take the 8 and over, or 7.5 and over. That might be a nice way to go, but you can check all that out at BettorEdge via social media and get the app there, or BettorEdge.com. James Seils, thanks again to you and my buddy Greg Kajewski, also John Steppe for joining us. Thanks to you, the viewers, for tuning in. So James, thanks so much, and happy betting, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Truly my pleasure, and thank you again for your partnership, you and Greg. It's been a wonderful association into our first 2 months here. It's been fantastic, so you're welcome, and thank you. So again, for the aforementioned guys, I'm Dave O'Hara, and to you, the viewers, that's all from us at Hawkeye. Thanks to all of you.